How many paragraphs is an essay? There is no hard and fast rule stating that an essay must have a specific number of paragraphs, but it must contain a minimum of 3 paragraphs. Many people believe that an essay should contain 5 paragraphs, but this is an extremely restrictive rule, and there is no reason to adhere to it unless you have been instructed to write a 5-paragraph essay. As a general rule, your essay will be divided into 3 major sections. To begin, you'll introduce your reader to your subject. Following that, you'll have body text in which you discuss the topic in greater detail. And finally, a conclusion in which you inform your reader of what you discovered after digging into the facts or thinking about the subject. In its simplest form, an essay can be composed of 3 paragraphs, 1 for each section. Estimating the number of paragraphs before you begin, this is a rule of thumb, which means it will not always work exactly as stated, but it is still useful. In academic writing, your paragraphs will almost certainly be longer than the majority of those in this video. A paragraph typically contains between 100 and 200 words. A rough estimate, a 1,000-word essay will contain between 5 and 10 paragraphs. What points must you cover? Another, less restrictive and more accurate method of determining the number of paragraphs required to cover your topic is to examine the major points that must be covered in the body text. A paragraph is made up of all the ideas that support or explain a particular concept. While planning your essay, you will consider or conduct research on the primary elements that will be included in the body text. It's safe to assume that each of these requires at least 1 paragraph. For instance, if you are writing an essay about childhood development and technology exposure, you should research the physical, psychological, and cognitive developmental effects of technology on children. When conducting research on this subject, you will discover that there are numerous opposing viewpoints, and that researchers have identified a variety of physical, developmental, and psychological effects of technology use in children. Assuming 5 psychological effects have been identified, you can assume you'll need to write 5 paragraphs if you are going to write a relatively in-depth essay. However, if both those who argue that technology is harmful to children and those who argue that it can be beneficial have conducted extensive research on the subject, you may wish to expand that to 10 paragraphs in order to cover both sides of the argument and examine how previous authors arrived at their conclusions. Like and subscribe.